Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Lawpath presentation. My name is Ryan Tan, and today we're going to be talking about how to launch your business online with confidence. So, if you've ever thought of launching an e-commerce store, launching a kind of affiliate program, some kind of a drop shipping business, maybe you're selling services online, this should be a fantastic webinar to kick it off. We'll be going through all of the essentials for legal. So what documents you need, what to put in place, and what to keep in mind when you launch your business online. Potentially, you've got a new business and you want to get the documents in order, or you've got an existing business and you want to check that you've got the right policies in place to stay compliant from a legal standpoint. So just as everyone's entering the room here, I will just announce today's presentation will be presented by one of our new lawyers, Sahil. Now, Sahil has a number of years of legal experience, and he does serve our clients on the legal advice plan, but also through our marketplace quotation system. So I'll introduce Sahil very shortly. If anyone has any questions as part of today's presentation, you may key them in the chat box or the Q&A. I've enabled both of them available. So yeah, key in anything you have. And as usual, we do have a very exclusive discount for anyone on today's webinar who does need legal support or documents. So definitely stick around for that one. So going through today's presentation, we'll be going through the essential requirements of starting an online business, what you need in terms of your legal documents and obligations to stay compliant. And we'll also go through how Lawpath can help at the end with a Q&A time with our lawyer, Sahil. Just a bit about Lawpath, who we are and what we do. So we are an online digital legal provider who provides online on-demand help for small businesses. And we do this through our contract management system, where you can manage 420 templates at the moment. You can create them, you can store them, and you can get them signed with e-signature as well. And on top of that, you can connect with lawyers on demand in a single platform. So you're able to connect with lawyers like Sahil, like Damon, like Sam, many of the other presenters who have been on here, and discuss your legal needs and review contracts for your business as well. So over the last year, 8 years in operation, we've served over 300,000 Australian businesses, and in the process, we've saved them over $100 million in legal fees, garnering over 10,000 five-star reviews in the process. So we're just getting started. There's plenty of areas that we can help out with your business from our workflows, our contract management, our lawyers and accountants, and we're just getting started on this mission and journey. So I'm going to introduce Sahil. He's one of our lawyers on the legal advice plan. He recently joined the team, so again, brings a number of years of experience around commercial contracts, business structuring, getting set up from a compliance standpoint, and then obviously advising on compliance with consumer rights, competition law, and a privacy law, which is very important on the topic of online business. So with all that said, I'll welcome Sahil to the stage to kick off today's presentation.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Great to be here presenting about how to launch an online business with confidence. My background is in commercial law. I work here at Lawpath, working with small businesses and early stage startups around any commercial law needs, employment, privacy, competition law, business structuring, as Ryan said. So that's a little bit about me. And Ryan, we'll go to the next slide. We'll talk about the legal considerations when launching an online store. Obviously, a number of legal documents required for you to really launch with confidence. You know, anyone can launch a website and put in that hard work, but in terms of being protected, having that assurity that your terms cover you correctly, that's where these legal documents come in. And that's how you, I guess, run a business legally and ensure that your website is actually compliant with all the laws that you need to be. And we'll go next slide, please. So I think we'll start with a really hot topic in, the 21st century in general, which is privacy and data protection. Everyone cares about where their personal information is going. And that's why having a privacy policy in place on your website, whether you're a really small business just selling some goods, or whether you have a marketplace that you're operating, anything in between as well, having a privacy policy on your website is important because it informs your user what you'll do with that personal information that you're collecting of theirs. So personal information, and this is governed by the Privacy Act in Australia and the Australian privacy principles. But what constitutes personal information is basically any information that helps you identify a person. And so that could be anything between age, name, email address, residential address, credit card information. All of this is considered personal information. So it's really important that your website governs and lets your customers know what you're doing with their information, because they will have to input it, whether they're paying for something, whether they're submitting a form on your website so that you can contact them back, and anything in between. And so if you're just dealing with Australia, then the Privacy Act applies. And basically the Privacy Act requires you to let them know how you're storing the information, what you're doing with it, and whether you're sharing it with any third parties, which you might have to do, especially where you have maybe suppliers, if they're customizing something, or if you just have delivery providers, or even your payment gateway provider. All of these different entities you're going to have to share information with. That's why having a privacy policy in place and explaining that is really, really important. And then if you're selling overseas, then you need to also look at what's called the GDPR principles. And these GDPR principles are basically released by the European Union, and they govern the European Union's take on privacy. And the reason why we focus on GDPR is because it's one of the most strictest privacy regimes around the world, which means that generally if you're selling to countries such as America, for example, and you have a GDPR compliant privacy policy, generally you are compliant with either Californian law or just other American law in general. So GDPR is the most restrictive, and it basically requires you to answer what you're collecting the information for, who you're sharing it with, why are you sharing it, and how are you going to use it for your business. And there's also a clause whereby customers can actually contact you and ask what information you have on file about them in the GDPR principles. So all of this obviously just shows why privacy is so important. There's a huge focus on where people's data is going. And if you're able to just show that to them, then it will really benefit your website. And coming back to that point of launching your business with confidence, being able to tell your customers where their data is stored and how it's used is really, really beneficial. And we'll go to the next slide, please. And then we come to the website terms of use, also known as terms and conditions. So basically these communicate to anyone using your website the rules and regulations in interacting with your website. So it puts the power back in your hands as to how you want the users of your website. They should be using the website on your terms, essentially. Anyone that visits your website is bound by your website, and it should dictate anything they can and cannot do. For example, there might be requirements for users to sign up to your website and become a member of the website in order to use it and to purchase anything. And then it will govern other things, for example, the protection of intellectual property. It will have disclaimers in place. It will have limitations on your liability. And these are really, really important, whether you're a small business and you're not actually selling anything, or you're a huge marketplace, or you're selling a number of products on a daily basis. And it's really important to basically govern the use of your website by your users. But equally as importantly is how you acknowledge that they have actually read the website terms of use, or how they acknowledge it. And this is where a click wrap agreement comes into play. And basically a click wrap agreement is whereby you are requiring your user to actually physically tick a box. You would have seen it a lot in your day-to-day, where they accept and acknowledge that they have read the terms and they're bound by the terms. And basically, if they do that, this is legally enforceable in Australia because they have confirmed that they have actually read your terms and are bound by it. And if anything was to go wrong, that would be really, really useful that they've done that. Alternatively, there is something called a browse wrap agreement, which may or may not be enforceable depending on how it's presented to the client, to the customer or the user of your website. For browse wrap agreements to be enforceable, you need to make reasonable endeavors to show people that your terms exist. And a lot of the time, you actually need them to read the terms. So you might have seen some companies where they make you scroll through the terms and conditions of your website and then click accept. Basically, this is a browse wrap agreement, which is very clearly showing them that there's terms that exist on your website and they have to be bound by it. But generally speaking, we'd always recommend a click wrap agreement. This is going to be the most useful for you. Ryan, we'll move on. And then there's obviously specific terms and conditions where you're actually selling a product on your website. So you should have terms and conditions surrounding the sale itself. And these will basically govern the terms that your users and people that are purchasing products off your website have to be bound by. So information in your terms could be such as products that you sell and how you sell them, the payment procedures, how the delivery of the products works, and basically giving disclaimers that you're not responsible for what the delivery provider does and the condition that the product reaches you in, unless it's obviously a packaging problem on your end. It highlights your refund policies, and refund policies are often, whilst the company may believe they can actually dictate it themselves, they have to be governed by consumer guarantees, which we'll come to later in the Australian consumer law. And then other things in your sale terms and conditions would basically be disclaimers and warranties. For example, that the user warrants that they will not use the website for anything illegal or for any unauthorized use. It will also govern your payment gateway terms. And often, for example, a lot of our clients use Stripe as their payment gateway, and basically letting your users know that they're also bound by Stripe's terms and conditions, not just your terms and conditions, because the transaction essentially goes through Stripe, and their payment gateway has a number of terms and conditions that the clients have to know about. So as long as you include in your terms and conditions that they're also bound by that, it's also good practice to hyperlink the Stripe terms and conditions in this case. It's really, really helpful. And then there's things around intellectual property and making sure that everything that's on the website is actually owned by the company, making that clear to the users that they do not have the license to copyright or use anything or distribute or reproduce anything. And then we see a lot of more complex terms and conditions as well. For example, when it comes to marketplaces, and basically you want to have warranties and disclaimers where if you have users coming on your website and you have sellers coming on your website, you don't want to take on any liability for the products that the sellers are selling, because that's a direct interaction between the two parties, and basically having warranties in place around that would be really, really useful. And we'll go to the next slide, please. The next thing is about intellectual property, and it's actually one of my personal favorite areas of law. Intellectual property as a term can often confuse a lot of people. It is a confusing concept, but if you think of IP as an umbrella term, we're actually talking about various different subsets within IP, such as your brand name, your software, any confidential information, and the list goes on and on. But to sum it up, IP is a term that broadly applies to something that is created or designed or invented or even written by an individual. And an important aspect of it is that it can be commercialized through sale, transfer, or license. And because of that, you can say that it has value, and something of value is definitely worth protecting. Thereby, you want to make sure that your intellectual property is protected as much as possible. And in Australia, copyright laws actually say that the one who created it owns it. So if you sat there at night writing something up, like a menu for your restaurant, that intellectual property belongs to you because you created it yourself. And we'll move on, please, Ryan. And so if you think about, I'll give you an example. So if you think about a Coca-Cola bottle, this is a very widely used example. I'm not coming up with this myself. There are a number of subsets of IP law within the bottle itself. So if you think about it, the brand name or the logo of Coca-Cola is intellectual property, and this can be trademarked. So it's an official registration. The structure of a Coke bottle itself, that is intellectual property as well. That was actually patented by Coca-Cola, the actual bottle structure, if you look at the original bottles. And then the recipe itself, as we all know, it's a trade secret, but it is technically intellectual property. It's just intellectual property that's not really registered anywhere, because they would have to essentially reveal the secret recipe for it to be patented. But in itself, it is still technically intellectual property, regardless of whether it's registered or not. But in terms of registration, a trademark is the most common form of intellectual property protection. You can and you should register your brand name and your brand logo. So there's a few top tips here whereby before registering your business, you should actually conduct a trademark search, and you should ensure that you're not infringing on any existing business name, logo, or slogan. And this also includes overseas brands if possible, even if they have little to no business in Australia. You should actually understand, it's really important. I tell this to my clients all the time, where you should understand the fine line between when to actually trademark. A lot of people decide to trademark their brand straight away, which is not a bad thing, but at the same time, you should be confident that you want that name and that is the name that you want your business to be going forward. A lot of people spend money and time trademarking it, and then they realize basically maybe 3 months in that, you know what, I don't actually like this name and I've already spent so much money on it. Maybe it's not the best idea. The other side of it is that you don't want to do it too late, in the sense that, you know, you've operated for 2 years, you've got an Instagram following of 20,000 people, but you've never actually registered the brand name. And then somebody else comes along with the same brand name, but they actually register it. So you're going to have to essentially, you'll be told to change your brand name because it's not registered. You're going to have to rebrand everything. You're going to have to basically, your standing within your customer base will have to be adjusted because you'll be a different name, different branding altogether. This was also seen, for example, in the In-N-Out case, where basically In-N-Out has a logo, the American In-N-Out, and they're registered in Australia as well, even though they don't really operate in Australia other than random one-day kiosks here and there. But basically there was a new restaurant called Down and Out, a takeaway shop as well. And what they'd done is they called themselves Down and Out firstly, which is similar to In-N-Out. And also their logo was very, very similar, not the same, but it was an arrow going in a different direction, but pretty much similar. And a court found that actually Down and Out cannot continue operating with that logo and name because it is sufficiently confusing to the reasonable customer that they can be confused between In-N-Out and Down and Out because they kind of look the same and the wording is almost the same. The logo is almost the same. So that's an example of whereby, you know, brands have had to actually change their trademark itself. Moving away from trademarks though, just in terms of protecting intellectual property in general, a lot of our clients, and I'm sure a lot of you, are outsourcing your design work. You're outsourcing to a graphic designer. Maybe you're outsourcing to a UX consultant to make your website. If I go back to the general concept, which is he or she who creates it owns it. So if somebody else is creating your website or somebody else is designing your logo, you need to make sure that you have an agreement in place with them whereby they are actually assigning the intellectual property over to you or your company or your business. Otherwise, you essentially do not own that logo or that website. And this becomes a problem in the future when you're trying to sell the business, or if you're trying to bring in investment to your startup and they realize that, you know, you don't even own your logo because it's actually owned by a designer sitting halfway across the country who 3 years ago designed your logo. So making sure that you have contracts in place which basically govern that relationship, and most importantly, assigning the intellectual property over to you so that you have ownership of that intellectual property. And that could be done through just the contractor's agreement. It could be a clause in there. It could be a clause in your graphic design agreement, or it could be a specific IP license assignment, which is its own document, which allows the assignment of intellectual property. And then we'll go to the next slide. And then, these are two examples, I guess, around intellectual property. The moonlighting problem. A lot of our clients are actually creating their business or creating intellectual property whilst being employed at another place. And it's become quite a big phenomenon, especially since COVID, I would say. So in these scenarios, you need to be careful about what you're doing. You need to ensure that you firstly look at your employment agreement, maybe get some advice on your employment agreement, because a lot of employment agreements will say that anything that you've invented or created during the course of your employment the intellectual property will actually sit with your employer. Now, if you are creating things for your business separately, which are not to do with your employer, you do not want that intellectual property to technically be owned by the employer. And this becomes a problem, especially if they take it to court, where they look at the specifics of actually how you've done this and what you've done. So there's a few general rules around it. You want to make sure you do it outside your working hours, anything that you're creating or doing. Try and buy your own laptop. Don't use your company laptop to do any of your business work or create anything for your business. Don't do it on company hours. As I said, yeah, so look to do it outside the company hours, and don't do it in the company office. If you can stick to these parameters, generally you should be okay. It obviously does depend on your employment agreement, so it's very case by case, but these are the general principles around moonlighting and kind of doing your business on the side. And then coming back to the issue around ensuring that your intellectual property is assigned over to you. This relates back to the Zuckerberg problem, whereby basically, Facebook back in the day had got a website called Connect You to create the Facebook website. And at the time, there was actually no agreement in place between Mark Zuckerberg and the other creator. So there was nothing saying that Connect You would own the intellectual property. So not long after that, Facebook launched, and basically that person had no rights over that website or no intellectual property value that they owned. So that's the Zuckerberg problem. And we'll move on, Ryan. Marketing and advertising for your online business, definitely important to comply with the Spam Act. And the Spam Act is really particular on any communication that you send out to your customers, whether it's about marketing, whether it's about your product, whatever it is. It governs that communication that's sent out to clients, and essentially it helps to stop spam, which is hence the name. So there's a few important considerations when you are marketing or sending emails out to customers or potential customers. You as a sender must be identifiable. So for example, that's like putting on your ABN or your ACN or your address at the bottom or the footer. In fact, you should be putting all of those informations. A big factor of it is ensuring that you have a clear option for them to unsubscribe. Every email should have an unsubscribe link, and it should be very, very clearly stated that they have that option and exactly how to do it. And it should be fairly reasonably easy to do so as well. It shouldn't be a super complex process to unsubscribe. And there's just a few exemptions from this rule, which are government bodies, political parties, charities, and religious organizations. Thanks, Ryan. PCI compliance is also important for your online business. It's essentially, it stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, and it essentially deals with credit card payments that go through your website. If you have a payment gateway provider, such as Stripe or PayPal, for example, all of these payment gateways, in the nature of their business, are PCI compliant. So you don't need to worry too much, but that's as long as you're taking payments through one of these platforms. Thanks, Ryan. And then the final thing we'll touch on is Australian consumer law. And so Australian consumer law is a piece of legislation that covers all Australians if they're selling goods and services online. And it particularly applies to the sale of consumer goods. Essentially, when you are selling product, you're bound by something called consumer guarantees. So you're guaranteeing that the good is of merchantable quality. You're guaranteeing that it will be fit for purpose. You're guaranteeing that it will match the description of what you're selling. And so there's a lot of scenarios, for example, where a company might decide to only give 1 month warranty, but actually, if you look at the consumer law, a lot of technologies are required to have at least a minimum of 1 year of warranty. So you have to really check the consumer law and kind of what you're required to do rather than what you're able to do. And so some important considerations in Australian consumer law are around misleading and deceptive conduct, around false representations, testimonials, unconscionable conduct, and unfair terms. So we'll go into these in a little bit more detail. Ryan, if you go to the next slide. So misleading and deceptive conduct, you basically can't mislead or deceive your customers. And so this includes lying about description of goods on your online store. displaying the wrong price, and making false or inaccurate claims about what your product or your service can do. And then there's something called false representation. So that's about avoiding making any false representations about your product. And so these include false representations about the price, standard, quality, value, history, or place of origin of your product. So for example, if you sell clothes and the dimensions of the clothes don't actually match the dimensions listed on your website, that means the product does not match its description. And it's essentially it could be a false representation, or it could be a misleading product, essentially. And so in these circumstances, you will be required, maybe not under your own personal policies, but under the Australian consumer law, to refund the customer in that case, because if it was to be escalated, you would essentially be found to have falsely representing the product because the dimensions on the website were incorrect. So these will often dictate your refund and exchange policies, because you're required to refund a product where it's faulty or different to what it's advertised. And then moving on to number 3, testimonials. So you don't want to give any false testimonials, of course. Unconscionable conduct. You can't target any group unconscionably. So you can't target the disabled people, the elderly, and the financially disadvantaged, for example. And then a big one these days is unfair terms. So if you're selling a subscription service online, you can't be locking people into contracts where it's super unfair. For example, you can't lock your customer into a 5-year contract and then increase the price of the subscription, because clearly these are unfair terms. The customer who was signing on wasn't aware of this, and now they're all of a sudden liable for something that's not their fault. So that's a little bit around Australian consumer law, and it should actually be dictating your refund and exchange policies, especially as you're working on your business. Thanks, Ryan. And so that's pretty much my presentation for now. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A, and then we can revisit them at the end. And I'll pass back to Ryan for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sahil, and very comprehensive presentation on the legalities of starting an online business. There is a lot to look at in those slides, no matter what business you're in, whether you're doing a services business or you are selling goods online. So how Lawpath can help, we've done a few surveys, and we find that around 80% of individuals and 87% of small to medium businesses find it difficult to access legal services that they need, so contracts and legal advice. They feel that it takes a long time, it can be expensive, and it can be complicated. So that's where we come in with our contract management system, with the templates, and having our lawyer calls on demand. So if you have any questions that pop up, you can book in a call on the platform anytime and be speaking to one of our great lawyers like Sahil to get your questions answered and your contracts reviewed. So that's exactly how Lawpath can help. As I mentioned, the contract management system has now 415 templates and is growing on a weekly basis. We've got personalized workflows. So if you're looking to hire a staff member, you're looking to create a family trust, to collect a debt, or even to get a full list of the privacy policies and website documents you require for your website, these are all available from our dedicated and personalized workflows that you can create and get a full list of the step-by-step instructions for those tasks. And these are also growing on a regular basis. Lastly, you can book in legal or accounting consultations. So if you do have something that pops up and you want to do a consultation on a reactive matter that's come up, for example, you have a trademark infringement or some kind of copyright infringement, you need to dismiss an employee, or you need to register a trust or get some urgent advice, you can book in these calls on demand with our lawyers and review up to 4 pages of contracts as well during the call. Potentially, you have more proactive matters. We do have a range of accelerator programs on our legal advice and accounting advice programs, which allow you to be a bit more proactive, and our lawyers can sit down with you and go through the long-term planning for your business. So reviewing your privacy and insurance policies, looking at the capital raising process, reviewing your intellectual property. So doing a trademark search and seeing if what you've got is suitable, and potentially you're looking to register more trademarks down the line, they can do a class search and see whether or not you can actually register that trademark. So no matter whether it's reactive or proactive, we can definitely help out with both of those matters. Now the documents library, here's a sample document which we've recently revamped. You can see the Lawpath business plan on the left-hand side. How our templates library works is it allows you to answer a series of questions which are very unique and specific to each document. And once you fill those in, that does pre-fill the document with those answers. So we're not just getting blank templates. These are workable templates which are aimed to be pre-filled and to fill in the information that's specific to your business. There are a number of questions which you can select a yes or no, and based on your answers, that will pre-fill the document so it's dynamic and specific to your business as well. So the one on the screen here is a business plan. This is a sample of what you'll see in the document summary. So if you're not sure if this is the document for you, you can preview a one-page sample. You can take a look at the top here, which will tell you if this is the correct document. And then down the bottom is a list of the clauses and the sub-clauses as well. So you can have a look and see and compare agreements to see if it's the appropriate one. So a list of our plans and services. We've got the two main flagship services here. We've got our legal advice plan on the left-hand side. This one goes for $120 per month, and it includes unlimited 30-minute calls with our lawyers. So you can be speaking with Sahil, Damon, Sam. We have many more lawyers servicing our clients on the legal advice plan, and you get 4 pages of contract review per session for the majority of documents. We also do offer live chat with our lawyers. So if you have a quick and simple question that you need a quick answer to during the workday, you can pop onto our website and click on the chat box and go through that one, and our lawyers will come back to you with an answer. Now, we also do offer video calls on this one. So if you do prefer a face-to-face interaction, we do have the ability for that as well. On the legal advice and accounting, so this one includes the legal advice plan, but it also provides you unlimited 30-minute calls with our chartered accountants, and they can cover all kind of matters around, say, GST, group structuring, asset protection. If you have accounting queries of how I should set up my payroll processing in the business, or your accounting software like Xero or MYOB, the accountants can do a demonstration and walk you through it as well. So phenomenal service. These are chartered accountants. They are highly qualified. They can provide a lot of different advice in different realms and different niches that you may be working in. And keeping in mind that the lawyers and the accountants, they do speak to each other. So again, it's not common to have your lawyer and accountant converse over your business and have a deep understanding of what you're doing, but this is the case here at Lawpath. Now, one more thing we do offer on this plan is an ASIC and ATO agent service. So if you ever require company changes, like changing a office holder or changing a company address or some shareholdings, we offer this through our business services department. So we can make those changes for you as part of being your ASIC agent who's appointed for that. Here is a brief rundown of the accelerator program, as you can see. So I've mentioned that the accelerator program is available on both plans, and it's phenomenal if you do want to take a proactive stance on your business and think 6 to 12 months or 6 to 18 months ahead of time and start planning, which is very valuable if you're going down the capital raising route, or even if you just want to sell the business to a family or a friend or someone who's buying it. Because as Sahil mentioned, especially around intellectual property, if you don't own the IP for the contractors and vendors you're working with and employees as well, that can cause an issue with the takeover of the business. So the 6 topics here around business structure. So we've got a dedicated lawyer who can go through your entities and your structuring to make sure that it's optimal. Protecting your brand and your intellectual property. So doing a trademark search, a trademark review, seeing if you're being protected with everything. Topic 3 on employment agreements and policies. So making sure that you're compliant, the award is correct, that you're employing your staff under. You potentially may have contractors or subcontractors, which we have documents and we can review those as well. Topic 4 on reviewing your supplier and commercial agreements. So again, these are very important if you're looking at an affiliate agreement, a commission agreement, a vendor agreement, ensuring that you're being protected through those. Topic 5 on privacy and insurance policies. So again, as Sahil mentioned, going through your privacy policy and your GDPR privacy policy. These are constantly evolving with changing laws, so you can go through and make sure they're compliant, as well as taking a look at insurance. So things like your public liability cover to make sure that you're well protected. And then on topic 6, how to get capital raising ready. So if you want to start the process of raising investment for the business, You want to look at safe notes. You want to look at convertible notes. You want to look at hybrids, how you can raise capital. What's the most effective way? There's many options down that process. And again, this is also a topic where all the topics complement this one. So if you are looking to raise capital, it is wise to go through this accelerator program. It is available complimentary for the time being on both plans as well. Now, I just want to cover this one quickly, the budget boost for business. This was a measure in the last year's budget. Last March, on the 29th of March, the government announced some extra tax deductions for our services here. So digital cloud-based subscription products are eligible, which makes Lawpath services eligible for them. So as you can see on the right-hand side, we have our 4 main services that are subscription in nature. We have the legal advice plan, the accounting, the essentials for documents, and also our virtual office if you do want to use our company address as your registered entity address. So these 4 products, they're eligible for 120% tax deduction at the moment, and this does end strictly on June 30. We have no news that it will be extended beyond this date. So again, any payments that are made before this date will be deductible at the full rate of 120% on next year's tax return. So again, that's why it's wise to look at the annual plans that we've got going at the moment and the discounts as well. So today's exclusive webinar offer for everyone here on the presentation, we have 25% off our legal advice plan. Now, the legal advice plan is not only the flagship plan, but it is highly recommended for all small business owners because you've got the templates, you've got them, you can go through the workflows and use e-sign and get all of it done, but nothing beats speaking to a lawyer and getting the reassurance that you're on the right path. So this is where the legal advice plan comes in. So 25% brings it down to a very cheap rate at the moment. It's an annual payment of $1,068. You're able to go right through that and take advantage of our accelerator program, and you can tax deduct that whole $1,068 annual payment on your tax return at 120%. So if you're interested in this or you'd like a callback with some more information, please key yes into the chat below and one of our team will reach out after the presentation to walk you through it. So I'll pass it back to Sahil for any Q&A. I can see that we have a few in the box here. So Linda and Gregory have got questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Ryan. So I'm just having a look at Linda's question to start off with. So do these apply to marketing outside of Australia? So I assume you're talking about the Australian Consumer Law and potentially the Spam Act. So it can be a bit complicated, and unfortunately it does depend. So the Australian Consumer Law applies to anyone conducting business in Australia, but there are various precedents around this. There's a number of cases that have historically and also kind of recently have dictated, how the Australian consumer law applies in relation to overseas. But generally speaking, Australian law provides reasonably good consumer protection and generally in line with other countries as well. So if you were not, I guess, found to be doing misleading or deceptive advertising in Australia, you could still found it to be doing so in another country, for example, America, under their consumer protection laws. So in the interest of erring on the side of caution, you can assume that they're largely similar, but of course they are different. And it would be best to check in with a lawyer that specializes in either Australian law or overseas consumer law. If you feel like there is anything that might be bordering on breaching consumer laws, essentially. And then in terms of the Spam Act, so we were talking about sending marketing material to your clients, about whether that applies to marketing outside of Australia. So it's interesting, the Spam Act only applies to commercial electronic messages with an Australian link. And so that means that the messages must originate in Australia. The person sending of the messages must be physically in Australia if it's an individual. And basically the central management or control of the information or the emails or the messages should be within Australia and accessible here. So in that sense, yes, if they will, if you're doing everything outside of Australia and you're sending it overseas, yes, the Spam Acts will still apply. You'll still need that unsubscribe option available when sending any marketing material. And then my second question on this Q&A is, could a foreigner start an online business to sell digital goods only and not be living in Australia? Basically, so you're saying that you're starting an online business from overseas and you'll be selling to people within Australia. Could a foreigner start an online business? Yes, essentially the answer is yes, but also in terms of relating it back to what we've been speaking about, ensuring that you're compliant with either the consumer protection laws, if you're in the US, for example, or the Australian consumer law, or any relevant consumer laws from whichever country you're in. But at the same time, you need to be careful, because it is possible that you might still be found to be selling under the Australian consumer law. And again, this goes back to a number of cases that have happened recently, whereby maybe they've found that a foreign company that's been operating mainly outside of Australia, they can be considered engaging in conduct in Australia or carrying on business in Australia. And this could be if you're making representations to Australian consumers, if you have a lot of Australian subscriber accounts, if you're generating Australian revenue, a large amount, or even having business relationships in Australia. So all of this might be considered in a courtroom, essentially. So all you need to do is, try and be compliant with consumer law in your country and with Australian consumer law. If Australia is your main target of consumers, that would be really, really useful for yourself and to make sure that you're protected. But overall, to answer your question, yes, you can be an online business overseas selling to Australia. Just be aware of Australian laws as well as your own local laws as well. And best to speak to a lawyer if you get the chance. Thanks, Ryan. I think that's pretty much both the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sahil, and thanks to everyone for your participation and attention.